This is the Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It is Tuesday, August 12th, 2014. This is a live broadcast. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son, fellow researcher, investigator, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Folks, you're about there 3 hours of this incredible programming, unbiased, uncensored news, information, analysis that you need to know in these very perilous times. You're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. That will become more and more apparent to you in the days ahead. We look well beyond the headlines and the bylines, a fog of disinformation, and bring you the news behind the news to expose the men, the women, the Satanists, the Luciferians behind the curtain. We broadcast live each and every weeknight for the new listeners, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. That's we're solid as a rock there, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on the internet at HomelandSecurityUS.com now as well, HagmannandHagmann.com. You've got to spell the word "and" out. That's HagmannandHagmann.com, folks. Bookmark both of those websites. Now, if you encounter over the next 24 hours any glitches, it's because I'm going to be changing a few things on both sites. They'll just be momentary glitches, but I'm adding a lot of information, and I just want to let you know that. Now, in terms of audio, we are simulcast live by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There, tune us in at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. Thanks for joining us tonight, folks. Thank you for deliberately tuning into us, purposely tuning into us. We really appreciate you as an extended family, each and every one of you. We really appreciate you beyond what you know. And as I say this all the time, and I mean this, I was going through some mail today. I've got to tell you, we've got some of the most well-informed listeners out there. Each and every one of you, thank you for listening. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your contributions of information. You've got some of the most, we've got the most astute audience out there. I'm going to tell you flat out. You give yourselves a big round of applause. Really, you really should. It's interesting to me how out of the box everyone is thinking, and we're seeing the riots in Ferguson, of course, continue. I have this image in my head as the country burns, as the world burns. Obama vacations. It's interesting how that works. It's almost as if it's by design. Now, people will say, well, it's better to have him on vacation and not have him in Washington screwing things up. I understand that line of thinking, but you also have, there's not even a pretense of statesmanship or pretense of decorum here. I contend, folks, that Barack Hussein Obama, and the more I get into this investigation, Barack Hussein Obama is truly the Manchurian Candidate. He is truly the person for the time in which we live. His history is a legend that was created by Western intelligence, specifically the rogue elements of the CIA. And you might think, that's just crazy talk. I believe that people that we've had on have pieces of his background but don't have his entire background. I don't know who his father is. I don't know who his mother is. That you heard me correctly. I don't even know who his mother is. Frankly, I don't know who his wife is. And for me to say that, I just ask, I humbly ask that you consider my experience as an investigator for a quarter of a century, and can take that into consideration when I say that I don't know much about Barack Hussein Obama in terms of his parental lineage. I believe that that secret is known by a handful of people. I believe that others have been silenced through intimidation, through threats, and through complicity. I believe what we're witnessing is what we're intended to witness. The other issue on my mind, and before I turn it to Joe, is this. As I look over ISIS, ISIS, not ISIL, not IS, but ISIS, the group, the terrorist organization. Western intelligence, and specifically the CIA, complicit with the United States Department of State, first under Hillary Clinton and, of course, next under Kerry, created ISIS, funded ISIS. And, of course, ISIS is the outgrowth of Al-Qaeda, which was a creation of CIA. But what's behind all of that? If you take a look at the group ISIS, for example, and you look at the bloodthirsty, the term bloodthirsty, we are talking a literal bloodthirst, are we not? If you look at the actions by ISIS of the slaughter, will this not cause at some point the world to plead for someone to come in and say, stop it, help us stop it, we've got to stop it? When you've got ISIS, children in half, decapitating children, drinking their blood, eating their flesh, yes, that's true, causing Christians to convert to Islam or die, or convert and die, perhaps more accurately. I do believe that we've got an organism, something taking place right now that's a direct result of something extremely sinister in the background, behind the curtain. Folks, we are seeing only the tip of the iceberg with respect to ISIS. There's something incredibly sinister here, incredibly evil. Not just the group, but what's behind the group. And I'm not just talking about the Western intelligence and CIA. I'm talking about what's behind those people. And I do believe that Obama is part and parcel to ISIS, to the extent that there's a level of collusion between Western intelligence, of which he is pushing and guiding, and the actions of ISIS, whether it's through commission or by omission. I believe that to be the case. And if that is the case, the evil is so incredibly deep, then it can only mean one thing, and that one thing is Time is running out. Time is getting short. And of course, people look. Everyone is overwhelmed. If you've gone to the grocery store, I went to the grocery store, and it's amazing. You go in for a few items, and it costs you $30, $40, $50. You walk out with a bag or two or three. And I'm not talking about filet mignon steaks that you're buying. No, bananas and lettuce and normal stuff, things that normal people eat. Oh, man. We've got a lot on our plates, don't we? We've got a lot of just normal everyday life is coming at us like a freight train. We've got to put food on the table. The average American, the average person in the West, you've got to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs. The family income, you've got to help, support. You've got to do everything in your power to keep the lights on and gas in the cars and taxes paid or whatever you've got. It takes all of your energy. It saps your energy. And I used to tell my wife, and I still do, stress to me, people talk about Obama needs vacations because of all the stress. Are you kidding me? He's got how many assistants and how many people around him that are giving him guidance and support, and they do everything for him or because of him. He sneezes, the doctor is right there with whatever he needs. Does he worry about his wife going to work at the grocery store at third shift, stocking shelves? No, of course not. Does he have to worry about paying bills? No, of course not. He might think, well, he's going to worry about the national debt. Really? No. And the biggest thing about vacations, well, he needs vacations because of the amount of stress in his life. No, folks, you know what stress is? Stress is worrying whether you're going to come home to a dark house because you couldn't pay your electric bill on time. Or stress is worrying about getting new tires on the car in addition to your child's health or grades or both. The stress is dealing with family issues and trying to live your life without taking the way of Robin Williams. And I don't suggest, of course, that anyone is thinking about doing that, but that's what stress is, isn't it? That's real stress. Real stress is pulling into your driveway and walking out to your mailbox and being afraid to open your mailbox for what you'll find. Oh, it's a credit card bill, or it's a gas bill, the electric bill, property tax. Where does the average person go to get away from that? To work. You don't go to play golf or Martha's Vineyard. Even people like Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, when you get to that level, you're so far out of touch with reality. If you can't tell me how much a pound of hamburger is or how much a gallon of gas is, well, pretty much everyone should know that. They are chauffeured by gas stations or whatever. But if you can't tell me how much a can of soup is or a gallon of milk or a pound of hamburger, then I don't want you talking to me. I don't want you running my government. I don't want you giving me advice on anything. That's the way I feel. And if you don't have to know how much that is, then I certainly don't want to be paying for your vacations. 2 cents. And by the way, I did get an email yesterday saying, why the pauses during your discussions or your monologues? My answer to that person is because I want them there. What was that? Hey, Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. We have Stan Deyo coming up in the second hour here. And what you were talking about, with the way that things are going, the economy, I was reading this article before the show. Wages in the United States down 23% since 2008. Wages in the United States down 23% since 2008. While 8.7 million jobs have been regained since the 2008 recession, according to the government, they're paying much less by an average of 23%. This according to a report released Monday by the United States Conference of Mayors. The report comes as the debate continues about income inequality in the United States. While the economy is picking up steam, income inequality and wage gaps are alarming trend that must be addressed. This from the Conference of Mayors President Kevin Johnson, the mayor of Sacramento, California, in a news release. We cannot put our heads in the sand on this issue. It goes on to talk about the annual wage sector in which jobs were lost, particularly were in manufacturing and construction. During the recession, $61,637 was the average wage. The new jobs through the second quarter of 2014 was down to $47,131. It's a $93 billion loss in wages in that time, in the construction and manufacturing,
sure,
hospitality, healthcare, and administrative support sectors.
So what we've got in here, Joe, is nothing more than we don't manufacture much of anything here in the United States. We certainly don't do anything in NAFTA, GATT, those different treaties that...
and we set up a new one with Africa, which when we have time to get into, we'll get into. But the president, through executive order, and I don't know if we even mentioned this or not, but I'm going to grab this here, executive orders. This was on the 8th, I believe, the 5th, establishing the President's Advisory Council on Doing Business in Africa. And that came after a other action that was completed by the President on establishing a trade union with Africa. It's establishing a comprehensive approach to expanding sub-Saharan Africa's capacity for trade and investment. And in this memorandum, and it was an executive order, I don't see it listed under the executive orders anymore, but I do have it printed out over here somewhere. It talks about a few things that they're going to change and do to try to help Africa become a more stable nation in the future of the international community. Their words, not mine. They're going to build Africa up and help with its resources that it has there. Help Africa get their minerals and resources out of the ground, and at the same time do so by building up their jobs and technology sectors. This is getting continuation of our globalist government mentality and the one world government system that is coming.
Well, we know what's going to happen, that ultimately the world is going to be broken up into 10 regions, of course, and the Antichrist is going to reign over the 10 regions economically, politically, and also financially. I mean, that's ultimately what's going to happen, and I think ISIS is a big part of this because you've got right now this group known as ISIS, that is establishing this Islamic caliphate. And I believe, look, for example, you've got Robert Spencer, who's very good about the analysis of the terrorism, the Islamic terrorism threat, and others like him, male and female, who have websites. They talk about the threat of Islam. They are not wrong. They are very much correct. They're very much on the money. Islam is a threat. Islam, by the way, is not, and I want to make this clear once again tonight, Islam is not a religion. By definition, Islam is a system of politics. It's a political system that is classified as a religion or wrapped up as a religion itself. It's first a political system, but it's classified as a religion. Now, having said that, the people who write about the threat of Islam don't understand that Islam is not the end itself. Islam is a tool that is being used by the people behind the curtain. Islam is in front of the curtain. It's in our faces. Sharia law in the United States, for example, is being implemented little by little. It's creeping into the American lifestyle, the Western, the fabric of life. It's being fueled by the socialist democratic process. It's being fueled and allowed in by the paid off federal judges, by the compromise. I shouldn't say paid off, but by those compromised in federal positions. It's being infused into our armed forces and our military. It's making its way into the highest levels of our government and the lowest reaches of our state and local governments. It is changing our life. It is designed to do that. However, it is not merely the end game. It is being used as a device, as a tool, much like you would use a crescent wrench or a jackhammer or a circular saw. Islam is, well, that's actually a good example. Islam is that circular saw or that machete. It's a tool. It is not the end. We find that people have this inability to see past what Islam is. The inability to see that Islam is being used to usher in this new world order. And we talk about the phoenix, the self-immolating phoenix, and America as being that. Of course, the symbols on our money and such. And I think it would do us good to really take a few steps back and take a look at this once again and keep this in the back of our mind. Once again, they're not wrong by pointing out the problems with Islam. Where they fall short is believing that Islam is the problem. No, Islam is a problem that is being used as a tool by those that are in charge of this new world order. And people have a tendency, I believe, because of the how maligned others have been, and or how the New World Order has been described. People have a problem with accepting the larger picture. People are not thinking big enough. They're not considering the bigger picture here. We've got to understand what's really taking place. Because when ISIS, for example, and you mentioned Joe, you mentioned the currency or the economic factors here. That's all part of the bigger picture, as is Islam. And sorry for changing topics and going back on this, but going back to this, but of course ISIS is saying that they're going to raise the flag of Islam, of ISIS, over the White House, and many will argue and contend that the flag of Islam is already over the White House. Well, to a certain extent, that is true, given the fact that they have made serious inroads into the White House, whether it's through our security, whether it's through various departments. And don't forget, Grover Norquist under George Bush was a big proponent of Islam, and of course that's the government aspect of things. And now Barack Hussein Obama, has entered the White House through the selection process and brought with him Valerie Jarrett's of the world, the Night Stalker of the White House, and also brought in to the mechanisms of our government the Islamic component, and brought into the military the Islamic component. But it didn't start with, and this is a rolling crime scene that we're witnessing. It didn't start with Obama. It didn't start with George W. Bush. It didn't start with George H.W. Bush. It didn't start with Clinton. It began a long time ago. However, it certainly accelerated under Carter, under George H.W. Bush, and under George W. Bush, who certainly has blood on his hands. And I will say this, to fail to acknowledge the guilt of all political parties in this is to minimize the problem, is to not recognize the enormity of the problem. I go back to the situation, and folks remember this. The people in the West didn't hear much about this. There was a historic event that took place in Jerusalem in January of 2011. An event chronicled widely throughout Europe and throughout Israel, but it was omitted entirely by the captured media here in the United States. Well, George W. Bush, then president, visited the nation of Israel. He was presented with a rabbinical decree. It was called the Scroll of Bush. I don't know how many people remember this. The scroll declared that he, George W. Bush, is none other than the prophesied Gog, the land of Magog, that is, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Don't forget, even as America's economic crisis was growing at that time, hundreds and thousands of people were losing their homes due to mortgage foreclosures, the mortgage fraud. The U.S. stock market was going quite down quite a ways. The U.S. dollar was sinking like a rock against foreign currencies. Labor stats showing unemployment rising more and more. American workers were laid off, and manufacturing was really sent overseas like a jet aircraft. George W. Bush went on this 8-day trip to Israel. In a way, it can be compared to Emperor Nero at that time. As Rome burned, Nero reportedly fiddled, and this callous and indifferent George Bush left a desperate country and people gasping for breath to go to the Middle East and consult with these rabbinical leaders on certain things. And it was on, I'm sorry, I said 2011. I did not mean that. Or that was a mistake on my part. This was on January 9th of 2008.
This is the George Bush?
Yeah, this is something that we talked about earlier, and I'm just going to briefly hit on this. I just want people to know about to understand this so people can get an understanding of the enormity of what we're dealing with here. George W. Bush arrived in Jerusalem on January 9th, 2008. If you are into occult numerology, you'll understand that that does translate into a 666. On the 11th day of January, he and Prime Minister Olmert, along with now former now former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, they were taken down inside Zedekiah's cave for a clandestine ritual, and arguably, I'll use this phrase because I don't know, but I've done some research, and I suppose one can argue that there was some sort of a black mass that was conducted by the Freemasons there. Now, that same day, Bush made other visits, one in particular to Israel's version of our Holocaust Museum. It's interesting because he stayed there exactly 90 minutes, a number again translating in if you are into occult numerology into 666, and it has serious prophetic meaning. While in Jerusalem, Bush and Olmert met with the press and referred to several key dates that were approaching. March 20th, which was the Jewish holy day of Purim, commemorating the mass murder and genocide by the Jews of more than 75,000 Iranians. May 8th, the celebration of Israel's 60th anniversary. But Bush at that time predicted that by the end of his term in 2009, there would be a peace treaty between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The treaty would ensure that the Palestinians will forever have their own area, but it would be a smaller area. Now, one of the things that really was used as a propaganda piece was that Bush was going to squeeze the Palestinians into this unlivable, uninhabitable small area. And even to this day, it is being used as propaganda. But that aside, you've got to take out the anti-Semitism that is steeped within this. You've got to look at it. You've got to look at this in a very objective manner. I just found it very interesting that at the time, Bush was handed a scroll during his historic visit. The scroll of Bush, the first page, the first page said, "In the name of the Lord, eternal God," not referencing Jesus Christ, but perhaps some other Lord, some other eternal God. It's interesting because Bush was identified at the time. The scroll, with the scroll addresses George W. Bush as the Honorable Mr. George W. Bush, President of the United States of America. Then, in this prophecy, I was going to say prophetic fashion, but it was almost like a prophecy. The scroll of Bush, as it was referred to now, referred to the esteemed Mr. George W. Bush, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, which is a reference to Ezekiel 38, leader of the West. Now, here's why I bring this up. If you look at Ezekiel, if you look at the current day, if you look at what's taking place in Iraq, and who started the war in Iraq, of course the United States, or what happened, who began that whole mess over there, who created the power vacuum? It was the Bush administration. Well, why? Because it was built on a lie. Was George W. Bush in on that lie? For example, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Did Bush really believe that? Did Cheney really believe that? Did Colin Powell really believe that? Did Blair believe that? Did all of the world leaders believe that? It took 9/11, for example, or the excuse of 9/11 for the invasion of Iraq. The reason I'm bringing all of this up, as we look at what's taking place today with ISIS in Iraq, the extreme violence, the bloodshed, the bloodthirsty, the cannibalism, the drinking of the blood of the Christians. Yes, this does go on, and this is not hyperbole. This is true. What started this? Go back and look at the Bush administration. Look at Ezekiel 38. Look at Magog of Skull and Bones decades ago. You've got to understand this goes back, that what we're seeing today goes back decades. George Bush Sr., George Herbert Walker Bush. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't want to be gross about this, but in the Skull and Bones Society, and I had to verify this for myself because I did not believe this, but in that Skull and Bones Society, there's a ritual where you lay naked inside of a coffin. Inside this tomb, this macabre mausoleum residence of the Order of the Skull and Bones, which is actually located next to an old town cemetery in New Haven, Connecticut. And they perform this death ritual. And, of course, this death ritual raised George Herbert Walker Bush, or whoever the person would be in this order of initiation, from the sarcophagus. They gave him, as they do all initiates, a new name. George Herbert Walker Bush, believe it or not, was given a name. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know what that name was? George, you want to say?
You said
George.
The first.
I'm talking about not George W., but his dad.
Yeah, wasn't it Geronimo?
Magog.
Okay, I haven't heard that.
Yeah. So, anyway, look, we've got well over 300 million people residing here in the United States of America. There are so many people who listen to us overseas in Europe and throughout the world, throughout the West. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is we find ourselves today in a position where the West will be begging for a savior of sorts to save us from the absolute, horrendous, unspeakable atrocities of ISIS and the very entity that was created by our own hand. To understand its creation, to me, is so important, because that way, understanding its creation and understanding the role played by not just Barack Hussein Obama or George W. Bush, but the roles played by George H.W. Bush and all of the people surrounding each of the selectees who became occupants of the Oval Office. We need to understand this, or it helps us. Once we understand all of this, the pieces of the puzzle, then we can understand how, when they say even the very elect will be deceived, when we understand the eccentricities and intricacies of the lies before us, then I believe that we'll be able to understand how even the very elect can be deceived and will be deceived. You've got to look at the whole picture. You've got to look at the entire timeline. You've got to look at all of these little rituals that make up the big ritual. You've got to look at all of these little groups that make up the big groups. And more importantly, you've got to look at who's really pulling the strings of the world, or who's really moving the chess pieces on the world stage. What hand reaches from behind the obvious player or players at the chessboard? What hand reaches from behind them, behind the curtain, to move the chess pieces on this three-dimensional board? Go back and look at the scripture. Go back and see Ezekiel 38. Go back and look at all of these various elements, how we got to this point in time, what happened with Iraq, what happened with Obama, or what Obama is doing, and what happened with Obama, what happened with George W. Bush, and every person in the White House over the last. It doesn't matter how far back you want to go. You can go back as far as you want, but when you see it all together, you'll understand that these planners, these satanic Luciferian planners, have had this in the works for a long, long time. And their plans are backed up by other plans, backed up by other plans. And people might think that there's just one candidate for the Antichrist, but I would submit there's only going to be one. But, they leave nothing to chance. I'm sure there are backups upon backups upon backups. And the last thing I'll close with is this. It's kind of what I opened with. I believe Obama is a Manchurian candidate. I do not believe that there's enough. I don't believe that there's sufficient evidence to prove that Stanley Ann Dunham was, in fact, Barack Hussein Obama's mother. Well, I can just hear Bill O'Reilly. I can hear him screaming and calling me crazy. Prove it. Prove to me through authenticated documentation that the legend, that the story, that the pedigree of Barack Hussein Obama is authentic. Show me authenticated documents. Not some picture PDF file on a computer screen that anyone can manipulate, but show me real documentation. Show the world. Don't hide behind your hubris and your holier-than-thou attitude. Don't hide behind statements that, well, if in fact this was a conspiracy, how do you explain the newspaper reports of a birth in Hawaii? Could people plan ahead that far? Of course they could. But sometimes the answer is a lot more simple. Do you realize how easy it is to lie, or how easy it was back then to lie? I remember when I was younger, I could lie about my age, and did lie about my age to get into certain, not to get into bars, but to get into, for example, to get into a certain class. You had to be 18 years old, and at the time I was 17. I lied about my age. Successfully. Things can happen. In the early 60s, there was not the technology to verify the authenticity of information there is today. So things do happen. Things could happen. Things did happen. I guess what I'm trying to say is, do not dismiss what you may not understand. But I think we're entering into a very, very precarious, we are in a very precarious time. The times are going to get worse, more precarious. And I do believe investigation will show, history will show, Obama was selected for this very date, very moment in time. Oh, and there were backups. And if you want to know one of the backups, look up Deval Patrick. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my opening statement. That last part there, I was just kidding around. But anyway.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the news as we got about 15 minutes before Stan will be on. And let's start with ISIS in Iraq. Pentagon says U.S. airstrikes will not stop ISIS momentum. Lieutenant William Mayville, the Pentagon's top war planner today, sought to lower expectations for the current U.S. air war in Iraq, insisting the attacks are having only very limited effects on ISIS operations and a very temporary impact. Lieutenant Mayville insisted that the current air war did not mean ISIS was contained or even that its momentum was effectively stalled, and that current strikes are mostly focused on keeping ISIS from moving directly on Erbil. This is the city in Iraq. When President Obama first announced the new air war Thursday, the strikes were said to be focused on stopping the Erbil offensive through the broadening the goals of the war considerably, aiming to protect Baghdad, stopping ISIS from taking key infrastructure, and preventing ISIS from maintaining its caliphate. In the context, General Mayville's comments must be seen as not only tempering expectations, but also laying the groundwork for further escalation of the war and advancing the narrative that the already large U.S. presence is insufficient for those growing goals. In another article, it goes on to say Iraqi militants changing tactics, complicating U.S. airstrikes missions. Islamic militant forces in northern Iraq appear to be shifting tactics in the face of the newly launched U.S. airstrike campaign, defense officials say, posing a new challenge to the Obama administration as it seeks to at least slow the terrorist advances. According to the now Islamic State, IS was behaving like a well-organized army, moving with strategic intent and pursuing military objectives. Now, officials are seeing at least a partial shift to classic insurgency tactics as militants begin to blend in among populations, making the targeting more difficult. So expect more. I saw we're sending some other personnel over there. What was it, 826 or 126? I forget what the title was. It wasn't soldiers. It wasn't policymakers. I'll have to find the article. But also in border news, moving along here, the Department of Homeland Security and the White House broke the law. This in a new article from today. The Obama administration broke the law when it released thousands of illegal immigrants, more than 600 of whom had criminal records last February, as a result of poor planning. This is what they say, poor planning and micromanagement from Washington, according to an internal audit released Tuesday that says things have not improved in the last 18 months. Compounding matters, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement gave bad information to Congress initially, blaming the looming budget sequester rather than the agency's own budget pressures, the Homeland Security Inspector General concluded. In the report, the IG does not clear up top Homeland Security officials' accusations that they pressured ICE to do the releases in order to create more pain from the sequesters. Now, we've heard this before with the sequesters. Remember last fall? Early this spring when Obama was shutting down national monuments and putting fences up at World War II memorials in Washington, D.C. to keep veterans out. They were doing what? Exactly what they said here, creating more pain from the sequesters. So here in this new report from the IG, Inspector General, saying Homeland Security officials pressured ICE to release these illegal immigrants in order to create more problems from the sequester. It goes on to say that top ICE officials botched its planning. They didn't inform their own supervisors of the problem and didn't even know the law required them to hold the 34,000 immigrants a day until they were reminded of it by congressional staffers. All that is a bunch of hogwash. It goes on to say ICE released nearly 1,500 immigrants in one late February weekend, just ahead of March 1st, 2013. So this was over a year and a half ago. And March 1st, 2013, the start of the sequesters or across-the-board cuts. When the releases became public, ICE agents had to try to round up many of the immigrants they had released after being told the laws designated some of them as mandatory detainees because of public safety risks or fears they might become violent. And it goes on to tell the story from there, how hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants have been released, from the Department of Homeland Security's orders to the administration's orders to Border Patrol, following along these orders, releasing these people into society, and many of whom have committed subsequent crimes after being detained and released, and now are detained again. This from the economy and financial news. Janet Yellen determined to avoid nightmare scenario. Approaching a historic turn in U.S. monetary policy, Janet Yellen has staked her tenure as chair of the Federal Reserve on a simple principle. She'd rather fight inflation than another economic downturn. She'd rather fight inflation.
Think about that.
I mean, it's an oxymoron. Inflation is part of an economic downturn. It's like, I don't even know what a good analogy would be. When you get your car filled up and you stop at a rest stop after a long drive on the highway and you still have a couple hundred more miles to go. You got to get the bugs off the windshield. You got to make sure your oil's okay. You got to put the gas in the car. That's like cleaning your windows and then continuing from there, saying, "Oh, that's all I'm going to do to make sure my car's okay." Leaving the rest of it, to.
That's a fairly good analogy. Janet Yellen is just continuing the Keynesian economic model that we've been under for quite some time. So the Yellen is really going to, I believe, bear the brunt of the dollar collapse, or at least be the person to usher in the collapse of the U.S. dollar, orchestrate the collapse of the U.S. dollar. And I believe that the U.S. dollar must be collapsed over at some point between now and the end of 2017. Or wait a minute, what is this? 2014, right?
2017 sounds about right. At least when looking at their plans for
2015,
implementing a new financial instrument.
Well, right. I guess what I'm saying is the new economic model will be in full swing by 2017. So the collapse of the U.S. dollar, in my view anyway, will be pretty much a done deal by the end of 2015. And I shouldn't set dates because dates are fluid. But if I had to venture a guess, and this is only a guess, I would think that by the end of 2015, by the end of next year, or even into 2016, considering the fourth quarter numbers of 2015, you would have a collapse. So, go ahead.
Switching gears again here, probably the last story till we bring Stan on. With the Ebola scares and the disease going around, I knew it would be sooner than later that this would come out. Biowearables could give real-time disease updates. Biomedical engineers are taking a cue from the technology industry, creating a wearable device that will alert diabetics to subtle but more important changes in their blood sugar levels. It could be tweaked to help anyone fight high blood pressure, lung disease, and a variety of other diseases that express specific biomarkers have already been identified. Each of these diseases has its own biomarkers that the device would be able to sense. This a commenter, Sherman Fan, a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Michigan, says, it goes on to say, the wearable device being proposed would use a technique called heterodyne mixing to enable nanoelectric vapor sensors to detect the different biomarkers from the surface of the skin. It identifies what happens when diopoles for specific biomarkers react with the sensor. And this goes on to say, this is a removable biomarker that can be used to basically prevent or treat, mitigate, and detect different changes with your body, with your if you're diabetic, with your blood level, or with the blood pressure, with your blood pressure. But this is a step into how they're going to phase in this RFID technology. They call this, oh goodness, I just stated it. It's called.
It's a pre-diagnostic, or it's a method of diagnosis that would be.
Yeah, but there's a specific word for it that's on the. I mean, I read it 150,000 times going through these RFID documents. It is some kind of. It's for use for authentication, and it is. I'll have to find the name, but yeah, there's a whole PDF on it, and it's from the FDA, and it talks about. It's part of the. This whole biomarker detection and mitigation technique is part of the National Preparedness Preparation Plan that they have out there that they released 2 years ago, Homeland Security with FDA, the White House. It's all part of the new economic, technological RFID chip that's being implemented. And I can't believe I can't remember the name, but I will find it.
That's all right. I know you're going to find it. You've got a pile of... if you could see our studio right now, it looks pretty much like if you've ever watched an episode of Porters where they've got the newspapers, magazines, and papers. And no, it's not quite that bad, but now we've got a lot of paper here that we're going through. But and as you're going to hear Joe going through the papers now. In the interim here, in this lapse, I want to thank Salvatore from Rockingham. That's in Australia, by the way. He writes the following. This is kind of going off script and going in a different direction. He writes the following. Great shows, by the way, to bring people up to speed on the devil's work after yesterday's show. And folks, we talked about the number 216 or the number 216. A very interesting number to be certain. Now, and the date of August 4th, Salvatore writes, I realized that from August 4th to the summer solstice next year is 322 days. You might think, so what? Well, 322, skull and bones. Good catch, sir. Good catch from Rockingham in Australia. Thank you very much, Salvatore, for that email. Folks, we're up against it. We are up against the top of the hour. We are going to bring Mr. Stan Deyo on. Stan Deyo had a dramatic, wonderful presentation last week about the Garden of Eden show. I thought that was a fabulous show.
Yeah, it was. And I think he's going to talk about what his other presentation was about today. So we'll be right back after these short messages. You're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, August 12, 2014. Stay with us. Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, August 12th, 2014, almost halfway through August already. Time just keeps on flying by. We are joined by our guest with which we are joined every Tuesday. That is Mr. Stan Deyo from standeyo.com. And you can go to his website, definitely bookmark it, as there is lots of important information here. And when he comes on with us on these Tuesday shows, he usually has presentations or images he puts up. You can go to his website at standeyo.com. Underneath the pictures of the books, on the right-hand side, you'll see a microphone. To the right of that button is the Show Images page. Click on Show Images, and you will find the images that he'll be using to talk about, or what he'll be using to talk about on our show. And they will be up for tonight in just a few minutes. But that's at standeyo.com. The Show Images on the right-hand side of the microphone button. Stan, it's great to have you back on.
Good to be back. I've had a bit of a rest now then, catching up on things and trying to answer all the email I've been getting about the Garden of Eden lecture. And some other things, too, from some of your listeners. Now, a while back, probably 2 or 3 weeks back now, then Daniel A., his last name starts with A, wrote me and asked me what would cause the sky to roll up and the stars appear to be falling, as he's referencing it's Isaiah and Revelation. In Isaiah 34:4, it says, all the hosts of heaven shall rot away, and the skies roll up like a scroll, and their hosts shall fall as leaves from the vine, like leaves falling from the fig tree. And Revelation 6:14 says, the sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Now, what that means to me is that we're looking at a change in the spin of the planet around its normal axis. Now, it could be that the planet tries to return back to vertical, or it tilts even more. But whatever causes that, probably an impact from some large asteroid or meteor that they talk about in the Revelation of John. But it's going to cause the Earth to violently shift that axis, and the spin of the Earth will change before the atmosphere does. And in fact, probably before some of the water does as well. Anyway, this will cause a sloshing of the water and a sloshing and ripples in the atmosphere. And these ripples will be showing how, like a scroll rolls up from an impact. It'll show the stars being splashed all over the place, but not really. It's just going to be the illusion caused by the air being splashed by this impact or whatever causes the axis shift suddenly. So I think that's what it's referring to. It could be wrong. This is so early in the piece of Revelation that I don't think it's referring to the heavens and the earth pass away and the new heaven and earth replace it. I think this is part of the judgments that happen and cause this effect in the sky. So just remember, the atmosphere can look like a lens, and when you warp that lens with shock waves and things from incoming or from changes in the spin, when you do that, it causes the oh dear, hold on, let me get that.
I'll get it, Stan.
Thank you. It causes the illusion that you see there. I was looking today at Drudge Report. I guess a lot of folks do that, nowadays. And I saw this haggard-looking President Obama, and I thought, why do all of our presidents here in the last 30 years or so, 30, 40 years, why do they all go into office looking all crisp and young and dapper, and come out with wrinkles and gray hair and look like they've aged more than anyone else around them? Now, granted, the job is very stressful. I mean, in our current president's case, it's hard to play that many rounds of golf, in a short period of time. But with the other presidents, and possibly this one, I suspect that because the presidents need to be groomed and educated on all kinds of things that they couldn't possibly do in an hour or two in the morning briefings, that they may have instituted using a room, like I suggested in the Cosmic Conspiracy, where they build a stationary flying saucer, if you wish. It doesn't look like that. It's just a room that uses the power in the field to make time pass faster inside that room than it does outside, so that a president and his advisors and all the stuff he needs to study could go inside that room and spend 2 or 3 days briefing for a 1 hour press briefing when it should be a 1 hour press briefing outside. So when he comes out, he spent 3 days and nights probably in the briefing room, which has got accelerated time in it. We know that happens inside the craft, depending whether it's the energy more dense than the outside or less dense than the outside of the craft. So I looked at him and I thought, wow, he was young going in, that he looks like he's really aged more than just the stress. Anyway, that was just a thought that I thought I'd share with you guys. And
can I ask you a little bit more on that? For example, okay, in other words, what you're saying is for me to picture a room where you can go in there and it's an hour to the people outside of that room, but it's the equivalent of a couple of days for the people inside of that room, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And you can reverse the field density and make it so that when you go into that room, for you, an hour passes, but outside 3 days do. Or you can accelerate that and say that you go into that room, you've been shot, you're bleeding, you go into the room and shut the door, and a minute or two later, they open the door and they've got everything you need, all the emergency equipment, doctors, everything, and they come walking in and they fix you, because they've had, like days outside to get everything arranged to come in and fix you, and you're just in slow motion. Everything is in slow motion for you. So it's a way to get help to a president or some high-ranking official that they would put in there to try to save when they have time-dependent things they can't get to them in time.
Interesting. And that sounds like pure science fiction.
Well, let me reference you back to South America here, 25, 30 years ago, and they talk about I think it might have been in Brazil, that the military was out there one night, represented military, and they saw this UFO come over and hover over the base. And so, Garcia and his men get together and they take their jeeps out and chase after it, and it disappears down like it's going to land somewhere. And so he says to his men, all right, split up, you go this way, that way. I'm going to take this path here. We'll meet back here in 15 minutes or so. So off they go. All his men come back to the rendezvous point, but no Sergeant Garcia. So they wait and they call. And eventually, he comes stumbling out of the darkness there in the weeds, and he has a 5-day growth of beard all of a sudden. His watch is not on the same synchronization with them. He's haggard, and he collapses. His story is that he saw the thing on the ground with the light. He started walking up to it, and, of course, as he was walking inside the field, he was changing the rate at which he was aging. He was going hyperspeed. And whether he went on board or not, I don't think they said he did, but he walked up and then he turned around to go back, and he'd spend all that time in the field aging rapidly while it was still dark, and so only 15 minutes had passed, and he'd gone for 5 days, or 5 hours. Was it 5 days? 5 hours, I think it was. Anyway, no, 5 days. He had a 5-day growth of beard. That's how they knew he'd been in days. So that was a report of time dilation by a witness who saw the UFO land and was using one of these electromagnetic fields. So, see that?
It kind of makes that joke, boy, I spent a week there one night, true, doesn't it? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We got a lot of fan mail from your listeners over that Ngoro, or the Garden of Eden show and stuff, and the lecture and the show we did with you. And one of the emails I got from a lady named Denise, I think I sent a copy of it to you, but anyway, she said that she was streaming the show from New York City, and of course duly amazed at the finding, and she'd always thought that Garden of Eden would be in Djibouti or something like that, but never did she think that Ngoro Crater region of Tanzania would be it. And when she saw that, she said, I nearly fell out of my chair. And then she said, no, quote, you see, I'm on the board of a small Christian organization that ministers to Maasai girls fleeing FGM. I'm not sure what that group is, but anyway, the home for the girls is located in Kenya, in the Mara, just north of the Tanzanian border. And as you know, there's something so special about the Maasai people in that whole part of the world. I had to laugh knowing that I've been so close to Eden this whole time and never knew it. On my next visit, April 15th, Lord willing, I plan to make a point of driving 5 more hours to the land of history, but no longer a mystery. Anyway, that was one of the nice emails. We got a lot of nice ones, and no ugly ones or bad ones. Everybody seemed to be in favor of it.
Well, and Joe and I are still talking about what you had disclosed. And folks, if you have not had the opportunity to hear that yet, go back to last Tuesday. It's in our archive where Mr. Deyo discloses the location of the Garden of Eden. Not only discloses that, but how he arrived at his findings. And the research is incredible. And I'll tell you, I listened to that show, Stan, twice now. And each time I listened to it, I've actually picked up more information. You kind of, I don't know how you did it, but you kind of slipped some information in there that it makes you stop and think, go back and, okay, let me look at this and that. And very interesting things. Very interesting. So I just want to commend you in your work. Thank you so much for everything you've done. And wow, man.
Thank you. I did make a couple of mistakes toward the end. I was getting tired on the value of the discharge out of the Amazon River, not the Congo. The Amazon River being the great beastie river on the planet. It did 22 million gallons a second out of its discharge point. And so even in today's, gravitational potential and with the continents being separated and everything, that's a huge amount of water, which tells you that back when the Earth was smaller, that it would, and gravity less, that it would have been an amazing flow. And to that point, I got a letter, an email from a guy named Alan O. And he says, I'm finding your quest for Eden talk on Hagmann Hagmann very, very interesting, and he made it in caps. Rest assured that when your DVD is ready, I'll be one of the first in line to get my copy. I'm writing to let you know of a 1-hour documentary video available to stream from Amazon entitled Ancient Amazon. And I watched it just a month or so ago. Listen to your talk on Hagmann tonight. That was last week. And it got me all excited to tell you about this video in hopes it will provide even more evidence for your Eden research. The premise of the video is that in ancient times, the Amazon River, now located in South America, with its headwaters in Peru, originated in Africa and flowed the opposite direction that it currently flows in now. Now, I paid my $2 to go watch that on Amazon Prime. I just rented it. And if you go to my show images page and you want to see that video yourself, the first link on there shows a bunch of green continents shoved together and a blue line coming from the northeast part of Africa across over into South America, which used to be connected to it when it was all connected together as Pangea. And that is interesting. I mean, that is just fascinating that the river would flow one way and then the other. And the documentary, I watched it, and it did show how they discovered that the river had once flowed backwards to what it is now before the continent split, looking at the strata, and at fossils and all kinds of stuff that scientists do and that sort of thing. But it was really quite encouraging for me to see that, because it was another thing that told me that the waters that the Earth had primarily came from Africa and the highlands there. That was kind of where all the high water source was, coming up through in Africa, in the Great East African Rift and in the Lake Victoria area, and just west of there where this river started to become the Amazon River. Anyway, I made a mistake about that, the length of it and the strength of it, whatever, and the name of it. So having corrected all that, now I feel better.
I've got a question for you. You did mention one thing, and I've heard this before, and I've never heard this explained to where I could understand it. And the bar's not very high there, Stan. Trust me on that. Okay, but let me ask you this. You had mentioned that the Earth at one point, I think you said assertively, had a canopy of water. There was a canopy of water over the Earth, in the atmosphere. Is that what you said, or am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Well, first of all, I draw that reference from the book of Genesis, where it says, and he created the waters above and the waters below and the firmament in between, or the land in between. Now, when you look around the Earth today, you've got sky above and water around, and what about the water below? Well, here's how you look at it. In those days, the water below was in a thin shell underneath the surface of the Earth, which is called today the Moho-Revicic discontinuity, or in short form, Moho discontinuity, because it changes the speed that earthquake shock waves go through it, and they can map it. And this shell is all over the Earth. It surrounds it, and it's down between 5 and 15 miles deep, containing very salty water, salts dissolved out of the magma and various other things it comes into contact with down there. It's hot, and it has about 3 times the density of normal water, a little over that, in fact. And that's the water below the land. Now, the water in our oceans wasn't in our oceans in the early days, before the Garden of Eden, or before the flood even, because they were the waters were suspended either in the atmosphere above us as a kind of a very thick but not a white cloud. It was like a lens of water, and the rest of the water was down underneath the the landmass. Now, when the planet expanded and split the continents apart, it created a space for the water that was underneath the Earth at that time, some of it to come up, shoot up in geysers up along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and various other places to make high-altitude hail from way up there in space, very cold, rain down upon, dinosaurs in Siberia and various other places, so that they were hit with falling ice so cold it was like liquid nitrogen almost hitting them, and that's why they froze with their last meal in their mouth, some of the great elephants or mammoths that were over in Siberia. Now, picture this in your mind. If you shrink the Earth down so, about 80% of what it is now, so that all the continents will fit together properly, you don't have an ocean. You just have continents as one landmass. Now, I know that's a little bit difficult for people to believe, but that's when you start downsizing the planet, that's what you get. I've run the tests, and in fact, I'm in the middle of making a video, which is going to take me a few weeks, to take all the continents and squeeze them down together and reduce their size. And I'm trying to do it in a higher resolution than has been done on the internet before, because most of them have a resolution of about 320p by 320, very small, very low resolution images. So anyway, I'm working on making a better resolution so that you can take it with a mouse and move the movie scroll bar back and forth, and it'll turn the planet around so you can see. Everything's all fit together just fine. There were no oceans. The water in the layer beneath the Earth was there, and in the atmosphere. Now, if you think about it, before the flood, before the planet exploded, or not exploded, but expanded into this present size it is now, before that time, men lived much longer. And you think, well, okay, why? There were two main reasons, other than probably eating healthy. The other other two reasons were that we had a shield from the ultraviolet light and from gamma radiation stuff in that water mist upper orbital shell. And it was also so thick with water, it wasn't like condensed into droplets that, like clouds. You were looking straight through into the heavens, and it was like a gigantic spherical lens around the entire Earth. And people on the Earth looking up through that were able to see things further away as though they were close. The star formations, everything were much closer, which is probably, why some of the ancient tribes in Africa, whatever, the Dogon tribe, could see stars that you can't see without a telescope. They had it in their records for so long. They would have had to have gotten that information just after the flood occurred, before the expansion of the planet started. Because after the upper atmosphere condensed and became rain, that was the first time they had rain. When that happened, then you lost the lens effect. And you also lost protection from the ultraviolet light. And there's another thing, too. Gravity was less at that time than it is now. And there have been a number of articles written here of late, the scientists looking at our estimations of how big dinosaurs were able to, like 20 and 30-ton dinosaurs were able to move around at all, because their bones are not strong enough to support that. And so they've used formula to estimate the size, thickness of legs and arms and muscles. And of late, there's been a challenge to that, saying if you apply that same formula to, say, an elephant now, to a skeleton, it produces a much bigger, fatter elephant than is there in reality. So even allowing for what happens there, with that new formula, the dinosaurs, probably the big ones, were still up around 15 to 20 tons instead of like 40, 50 tons. Now that's a lot of meat, and to move it around and to have the battles that you see in the movies and stuff, something had to give. I mean, they just didn't have the musculature and the bone structure to support it with current gravity. So in my research, which I'd actually started before I even found the Garden of Eden, I used some formula that are fairly standard formula for angular momentum and inertia and things like that, to see what would happen to the Earth if we put it back to 80% of what it is now. And instead of having, a distance from the surface of the Earth down to the center of the Earth of 3,959 miles, we'd have a distance of only 3,167 miles, which is 80% of what it is now. Well, that changes. If you leave the same amount of energy in the spin of the Earth as it is now, that changes the length of day even more than I thought, when I was first doing the Garden of Eden lecture. It makes the length of the day somewhere around 15 to 19 hours. In this figure here, it's 15.36 hours in the length of a day, which means a year is nearly 562 days in a year of our normal days now. Having said all that, you can go to that show images page and you can see that on the second line first thing, there's a little squiggle that looks like a spreadsheet, which it is. You click on that and you'll see the formulas that I used. When I determined how much the centrifugal force had offset the force of gravity in the smaller Earth, it showed that gravity was about 1/3 what it is now. To be exact, 32.77%. Now, the other day, I was reading up on the dinosaurs and this reports on their bone structure and whatever, and there was another very learned article written about it showing, equations and calculations to say that for the beasts that had those skeletons to survive, that the force of their weight had to be 32 to 33% of what it is now, which would mean, of course, gravity has to be that. So within 0.5% or so, I've come up with the same conclusion that he came up with by just looking at the structure of the bones and how heavy the dinosaurs were and how fast they needed to move and that kind of stuff. So I wrote him a letter. I said, look, you're not going to believe this, but my figures come up to almost the same thing you've got, close enough as need to support what you're doing. Now, I haven't heard back from him yet, but it does reinforce the thought that the Earth was smaller, did spin faster, and the centrifugal force trying to throw you off the planet counteracted the gravity to the point that the gravity was 1/3 what it is now. Now, that would have meant that human beings, Adam and his descendants before the flood, could walk around with great ease. They could leap and jump, and they could probably leap and jump a lot higher than we can now. The stress on their circulatory system and their bones and their tissues would have been less as well because the gravity was so weak. It was really quite an interesting thing and an interesting time. Even plants grew bigger in those days. And there was a change in the amount of oxygen and nitrogen, the separation of it due to gravitational sorting and all kinds of stuff. So it's a whole new field of research that a lot of us are poking at from different angles and coming up with the same answer. We've got to rewrite the way that we determine geological age and the age of the dinosaurs and the sedimentary layers, because the other evidence is overriding that and saying modern man, modern animals, and dinosaurs, even up until probably 4,000 years ago or somewhere in that region, coexisted, and the dinosaur footprint, the human footprint together in fossilized stone is not a fake; it is real. Then in rewriting these things, we have to figure out why, when we use various gases and carbon-14 to do our dating, why those figures aren't correct. And Barry Setterfield, I've said before, has tried to answer that question, showing that the speed of light used to be exponentially faster than it is now. If that's the case, then we live in a period of time that is catastrophic, from the Garden of Eden to now, in catastrophic events, not gradualism, not millions of years for the continents to slowly drift apart 1.5 inches a year or whatever. That's rubbish. That might be happening now, but the original impact was such that the land masses split with great force and catastrophically and shoved India up into what is now Iraq and Iran, and into to form the Himalayas between China and India, and to form Indonesia and spin Australia clear off of the side of India down into where it is now, shove the South Pole down to where it is now, break Madagascar off the east coast of Africa and shove it down to where it is. It was a catastrophic event. And so what we're trying to do now is put it all back together to show how it was in the beginning and how it proceeded forth. Excuse me. Anyway, that's what that formula is all about. For you math geeks, you can go have a look at that and pick holes in my argument. But it is important to the argument about the dinosaurs. And if you go look at that show images page, on the top row in the middle, you see a picture of dinosaurs. And there's some very good articles on David Esker's Dinosaur Theory webpage. I won't go into all of them now, but you can see 3 panels there that you can click on to go to his homepage, and then especially to parts 3 and 4, which talk about how the ancient, dino birds could fly with such huge wingspan and such huge weights, where they couldn't do it today in our atmosphere and our gravity. And also it then goes on to talk about the weight of the dinosaurs in part 4 there, and how they could support it or how they couldn't support it in the modern world. And if you go back into the top row first image there, it says, click here to see links you should visit. And that's where we went a while ago to look at the Amazon River coming from Africa over into South America, all the way to Peru. But if you look down there, down toward the bottom, the very 2 bottom pictures, they are showing dinosaurs that have been in carvings that are thousands of years old. And these dinosaurs are not skeletons, they are real. You can see, I think it's called a stegosaurus, I'm not sure, but in that one there, the second from the bottom, it's got those fins up its back. And if you click on that, you can go over and see more about it in the website where it came from. Yeah, it is a stegosaur, Stegosaurus stenops. And, you got to wonder how they knew what it looked like if they didn't see one. We're still arguing about how much fat goes on the bones of a dinosaur, how much muscle. And here's a carving of one, probably to scale half of it. And it does look a little slenderer than we thought, but they had to have seen it. And this is while humans were on the earth over in Cambodia. And there are places, like even the Anasazi carved pictures of a long-tailed, long-necked dinosaur, probably one of the herbivores. And it's in the Bridges National Monument in Utah. You can see that picture there, and you click on it, and there's a whole page full of either artifacts, like little carvings of things to hold jewelry or food or something, and then toys for the kids to play with, and then that Cambodian thing again, or decoration on the wall that show dinosaurs of all kinds. And again, if you look at these ancient drawings or carvings, they couldn't have done it without seeing the actual animal. With all of our science, we cannot accurately, describe these things. We're getting pretty close, but we could not for the longest time because, we had to develop formulas for muscle tissue thickness and fat and skin and agility and degrees of motion, all that kind of stuff. But this is just telling us that, look, we may not have all the answers as to why our timeline is out and why the way we measure geological events is incorrect. But these things tell us positively that the dinosaurs were prevalent when man was on the earth and after the flood even. So this is worth study, and I'm trying to get that idea out into the scientific community so that people will say, oh, all right, well maybe that's worth having a look at. I think back in June, July, there was an article put up on the website. I put a link to it. It's the second one down on that page, that show links page, showing the dual north-south poles on the Earth and in the sun as well. Now, I've addressed this before on the show, but I'm going to do it again. When this happens on the sun, it takes a few weeks, between flipping of the North Pole at the top of the sun to the one at the South Pole flipping. Sometimes they reverse their flip order. But when they flip, in the top half and the bottom half of the sun, it shows us there are two poles. There's a plus minus, a north-south pole that's vertical in the northern hemisphere of the sun, and the opposite of that down in the southern hemisphere. So there are two north and two south in the sun's interior at any point in time. Now, they can shift and flip independent of the other. So when you look at the picture to the right there, which shows the latest NASA images showing the magnetometer, readings for the magnetic field of the Earth, you see two north poles and two south poles on our planet. Now, does that mean that, that we're going to see a northern hemisphere flip where we have a north-south magnetic pole, two of them, the north-south pole, flipping around in the northern hemisphere and one in the southern hemisphere? It is possible. From looking at this image, they show the dark blue lines being one pole in toward the center of the planet. It could very well be that we're going to see the same thing that happens in the sun happen here. And there's some logical reasons for that in the way that gravity and magnetism really work, which is a subject of a paper I've been writing for 2 or 3 years now. I've been slack getting it finished, but it is there and I understand it. We may be about to see a pole reversal, a magnetic pole reversal right now. I mean, soon. Not days or weeks, but I'm saying in the next decade or so, we would see that. And this magnetometer, plot that NASA made available does indicate that. It's just extraordinary to see that we have two north-south poles right now. And we also know that the North Pole has been wandering at twice the speed of the South Pole. So our northern hemisphere North Pole and its shadow companion South Pole up there in the northern hemisphere may flip before the bottom does. And this could cause an instability in the core of the planet, the rotating, spinning magnetic core. It's a compressed, very dense fluid and metal at that. And if that gets turbulence in it, it'll form nodules as it reestablishes itself into a stable spin. This may cause the actual physical spin axis of the Earth to again wobble in some different direction or to suddenly jerk in another direction. I've seen it when I've played with these tops. They got string on them. In the old days, you could throw the top down on the ground, right, and the string would make it spin very fast. You'd watch it, and for a long time it'd spin vertical. Then you'd see, it's starting to get tired. It's starting to slow down, and you'd see the occasional off to the side. It tilts off the side and then straighten back up, and it goes straight for a while, and then again it'll do that. And these were because of small little differences in weight in that top around the spin axis, causing this irregularity. And periodically it would all add together and cause that top to do a little jig and then straighten up again. We may see that with the Earth itself.
And what would that the observable or the perceptible ramifications would be what, Stan, specifically?
Well, first of all, the magnetic shift will definitely be observable, as the North Pole won't be where you think it is on your magnets, your compasses. Your landing strips will have to be altered very rapidly to show the new north-south or east-west vectors for your runways. We've already seen this happen in the last 3 or 4 years down in Florida and a couple other places, but they're saying this is normal. So if we see it happen with more intensity in the next year or two, then we know we're getting close to a magnetic event. And that could cause, depending on how fast certain pockets of this shift occur, that could cause shorting in various power grids. I don't know whether it will or not, but because it'll be in a state of flux, it's going to weaken our shield, our upper atmosphere, the ozone layer and the ionosphere. They're going to be thinned, if not holes in them all over the place, wandering all over. And this will allow radiation to creep in and to certainly hurt vegetation of people underneath these holes that form the magnetic field. It may also allow CMEs that are occurring, quite frequently in the sun, to get through our shields because of these holes that are opening up and really do some damage to the power structure at that point, not to mention what it does to vegetation and to life, animal life forms. The UV field, or the UV bandwidth in the C bandwidth of UV, is very dangerous for us to get. UVB is okay. It's it can still cause damage if you're at it too long. UVA, you don't worry about too much. You can wear a shirt and get rid of that. But certain types of trees, pine trees and various other things, when they get exposed to UVC range, will stunt and sometimes die. They will behave very weirdly. And you can sometimes even see genetic modification to plants, to flora and fauna that are exposed to that UVC. And if our shields are down, there will be a roving set of holes all over the planet that will allow this through. And that's worst case scenario. But, the book of Revelation of John, the worst case scenario. It's a place you don't want to be when all this stuff hits.
Yeah, you're precisely correct. Wow. So could that also, if it was severe enough, as you said before, where the days were actually shorter back then than they are today, and could it affect the time itself or the length of days, or?
It could.
Okay.
I think I don't know that it would be as drastic as it was when the Earth was a different diameter. Certainly. Wait a minute. What did we just read a while ago here from that letter there? Let me just find that. The sky, Revelation 6:14, the sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Now, islands are high, islands are low. Or mountains are high, islands are low. This must mean there's some kind of a change in the tectonic plates, some of them being sunken, and some of them being raised, so that islands get raised up and mountains get brought down. Now, I'm just trying to think, if we expanded again, if the planet expanded again, all right, no. Every mountain and every island could be removed from its place, meaning shifted, and also even raised, if we did have a diameter change, but certainly shifted. So that means there's not going to be any place on the planet of the Earth, on an island or on a mountain or whatever in between. Nowhere are you going to be exempt from feeling this surge of the ground underneath you moving somewhere else and possibly getting further from the core of the Earth. It's like the natural forces, gravity and whatever, and wind and all that other stuff have lost their way because of the changes underway. Interesting thought. In fact, over there underneath, or just above that Stegosaurus photo I've got over on that links page, I have a picture of the French Antarctic scientific outpost, and they had the coldest Antarctic June ever recorded. And there's an article that tells you about that if you click on that. Now, while that's happening, we've had a much warmer Arctic, northern area of our planet. This usually happens in like copper conductors or something like that. If you run a direct current, like from a car battery, from one end of a copper bar to the other, it will move heat from one pole to the other. It'll make one pole hotter and the other one cooler. And especially if you have copper and, say, platinum, some different metal touched together, at their ends, to form a junction. It's called the Peltier effect, I think. Peltier, something like that. It might be Thomson. I think it's Thomson talks about moving the heat. But anyway, when a direct current flows in our planet, say from the South Pole up to the North Pole, it can take heat out of the South Pole and dump it into the North Pole, thus heating up the North Pole and cooling the South Pole. This will happen probably with an easier mechanism, since we have dual north-south poles floating around, one in each hemisphere. I mean, even NASA's animations show that. So this cooling and heating irregularly and this rapid movement of the North Pole versus the South Pole's wandering tell me that there is a direct current component in our Earth field at the moment that is playing havoc with the temperatures in the Southern Hemisphere down toward the pole, and also in the Northern Hemisphere by heating it up. Huh. Interesting.
It's a marvelous thing to almost feel. You go through your mental gymnastics as you try. I love it. It's a genius at work here, really.
I hang the sign on the door.
I've got an email from Jeff B. from Burnville, Pennsylvania. When you were talking about the time, the subject line is for Stan, UFO maneuvers. And of course, he continues, as the UFO maneuvers as they appear to defy physics. By the same principle as you described with time on the briefings, presidential briefings, he writes, I was thinking this same thing while reading Tom Horn's Exo Vaticana. The UFO's time is slower than the vision of us seeing it, kind of like us seeing only 1 of 10 frames of a moving video, ? You get what he's saying there? In other words,
yep.
Yeah.
Again, I've addressed this in a number of lectures and shows before, but it's worth repeating. The craft that is an electrogravitic craft has a pulsing direct current field going through every atom inside that field, every atom of the crew, every atom of the ship. When they are traveling from point A to point B, if they can't go in a straight line and have to make course corrections, they don't do it as a gradual curve. That's why they go zip, bright light, zip, turn at a right angle or at a sharp angle, and then start again in a straight line and stop, flash. And this all happens in a fraction of a second. But the reason is, when you're going to turn the corner, and you've been doing, say, 20,000 miles an hour in the atmosphere inside that field, you need to adjust the field density so that you amortize the amount of time that you and the craft take to turn that corner so you don't get splashed into a flat wall of inertia and get killed, by the the inertial forces, by the G-forces. In the craft, you could be in the craft and the gong could go off saying, course correction coming, and okay, who's on coffee duty today? Some go pour the coffee, sit down, have a game of cards, look out the window at everybody outside just, at a different time rate than you are. They are like slow. And to them, you're a bright light coming up to a stop, a pulse of bright light, and then off in a sharp angle from there to some other destination. But for you inside, you've spent a longer time absorbing the inertial change to your craft and to your body, going around and making that turn. You don't want to do that in a gradual arcing turns at high speed because it's just it ages you too much to do that. But you do age rapidly, many times quicker than you do outside that field when you're inside turning corners, which is another reason not to turn corners a lot, in those craft, because you're adding, time to your age, and you're aging, more than your twin brother would outside on the surface. And when they go to turn the corner, they've made the turn, and they've spent, 100 times as long as the blink of an eye to get around that corner. It amortizes or stretches out the stresses of making that change over a longer period of time. When you do that, it can be a 1G force amortized over, say, 100 seconds, and that might have been 100 Gs that they would have experienced if they had just tried to do it for real without the field to protect them. So anyway, that's why you see that. And then when they turn that corner, that bright light is where they throw off the energy, change the energy density, and it creates a burst of light to us in a fraction of a second. To them, it takes, minutes. And then they normalize the energy density of their craft and their crew back to normal time, and zip, off they go in a new direction. I think that's what the guy was probably wanting to know.
Interesting, yeah. That's the way it sounds. And the explanation, I'm still having I'm still trying to get it through my head, the notion, I suppose, of time in slowing down, speeding up, and the ability to do that.
Well, first of all, the notion is this. We measure time by how things fall apart or change color or change position. A tick-tock clock, the arm moves from this side to that side, tick, tick, that's a second, that's a second. Okay, we're watching that thing change positions. But time, even with a cesium atom clock, what we're measuring is changes in the diameter of the energy of a cesium atom, of its outer diameter. It vibrates. So, actually, time does not exist. It's a dimensionless ratio of things, that how far one thing travels while another thing travels or expands to that size or doesn't. When you look at physical and chemical reactions that cause us to age in our body or allows us to think or blood to pump and things like that, these depend upon the energy density of every atom that's involved in you and your surrounding operating together at that spacing between the atoms. When you change that by expanding the distance between the atoms or compressing it so they're closer together and increasing their spins, you change the rate at which these things do whatever they do, chemical reactions, physical displacements, whatever. And that we record as it did a lot more of whatever than the identical thing on the ground, because the physical and chemical reactions were taking place faster. And
okay. For a simple guy like me, let's just say that there's another planet out there just like Earth. I mean, in terms of the atmosphere, with the exception of gravity, kind of like a younger Earth that you described, or even rather than go that route, how about the moon? How about if somebody lived on the moon as opposed to living on the Earth?
Right.
Would that affect the aging process? Let's see. Is that even a valid question? In other words,
I'm thinking on that. Give me a second, Doug. I have to think on that. That's a good question. Energy density being the same on that. It probably would be about the same. Yes, I think it would be. Again, what I'm trying to do is estimate things like the charge density on the moon versus the charge density on the Earth and some other factors. The Earth has a magnetic field, the moon doesn't, and, well, not much anyway, but all these things have come to bear on the aging process.
So I guess what you were saying initially, in the early Earth days that you described, where the hours were shorter, the gravity was 32.77% of it, what it is now, and so on and so forth. Everything was different, and therefore life reacted differently to the environment. Is that what you were saying, kind of?
Yes. Sir, I'm just getting a little lag in your Skype voice, and so I'm having to wait for you to finish a word. It's time dilated. Get it? Yes. One other thing I didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time on, but it is on the show images page, is that there is a group, last week, they've become very vocal in Jerusalem, and they are calling for the third temple to be rebuilt. And now that they're doing it, and the Arabs are doing it in Turkey, as I read last week. So you can see that there's a strong and rapid demand for building the third temple right now over there where it needs to be done. And I'm just, amazed at how quickly these things are happening right before our eyes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Stan, I do have a question from a listener. It's a little bit off topic of our discussion, but they want to know if you can comment on Comet Siding Spring and its potential impact with Mars, and if Earth will have or see any effects from this.
Well, if it does impact or come extremely close, it could disturb the orbit of Phoebus or Deimos, those irregular rocks that are satellites of Mars. If it does impact either those or the surface of the planet, it could throw up ejecta, that will leave the planet, that will break free of the gravitational force of Mars and wander around. And so eventually we may have a new set of meteors, near-Earth objects to worry about, but down the road, 2 years. That's, I think depending upon the vector of the comet and when it actually comes and dislodges anything on Mars or orbiting Mars, it could be sooner than I think, or longer. But I do think that it will do what it's done before and uproot some of Mars, whether it be satellite or the surface, and eventually they will crash into Earth as meteorites. And that's why we found meteorites that were actually from the Martian soil here on Earth. It'll just be an extension of that, hopefully a small extension, but and a long time down the road, so that we have developed technology by the good Lord to bounce it off so it doesn't hurt the Earth.
Gotcha. Speaking of off topic and different questions, this from Sal again, from Salvatore from Australia. Is it a major pole shift predicted by, now he quotes Nostradamus and Edgar Casey, and as quoted by Stan in the Bible, Seal 6 of Revelation? Any connection to Nibiru, Planet X, the destroyer, bipolar sun? Question mark.
I still have yet to see strong evidence of this Planet X. I know theoretically, hypothetically, where it would have to appear, and I just have not had any confirmation by my astronomer friends in the Southern Hemisphere who would probably see it first. And although there are records that do indicate something in the early days of mankind did come close to the Earth and do a lot of damage. Velikovsky's work is good on that in Ages in Chaos and Earth in Upheaval, a number of his books, which were quite learned books on the subject. In fact, I think it was in Velikovsky's book where he talked about reports of the ancients that sounded like a big lightning bolt leaping out of Venus as it jumped out of its, came into our solar system or jumped out of its existing orbit down to where it is now. And as it passed Mars, there was a big change of lightning bolts or, electricity between them, which is, good in my opinion, because we do have an electric universe. Electric fields are everywhere in galaxies and star systems. Let's just say that the jury's out, as far as I'm concerned, on whether we have a Nibiru in modern times going to cause us grief. In the past, okay, could have been, but now I'm not sure.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Yeah, and folks, if you have any more questions for Stan, you can email him directly, or you can email us, and we'll try to send them to him. But in closing here, all right, Dad, I think you asked that one. I just want to make sure we covered everything while we got you on here, Stan.
Okay.
Seeing as how you're so elusive. No, but it is. We do get a lot of feedback.
Well, at least it's not slippery.
No, we get questions in all week, all week long, Monday through Friday, about you and questions for you, and that I need to do a better job of putting them in proper order because, I'm not going to go through and try and find them all. I'll just forward them to you, and if you have time, and if not, we'll go through them next week when you're on. So StanDeyo.com is the website. And do you know when the video presentation will be available from your Prophecy in the News?
That's an interesting question, actually, because we thought originally going to be 4 to 6 weeks, and that would place it sometime toward the end of September. But there's a development on my Garden of Eden lecture in that we've had so many people wanting to see it and do live stream that we may be setting up a site. We're still investigating how it would work, where people could live stream just the Garden of Eden thing for a reduced price, and that they would just need to do like they did for the conference, but just get a little ticket and go into that site and put the numbers in and watch the video. Because when I go onto large shows like yours and possibly John B. Wells here, we've been talking about this week, Coast to Coast AM, with all the listeners out there wanting to hear, and see what everybody's so excited about, and with DVDs still kind of down the road a bit, several weeks yet, we thought what we might do is just have a single site set up just for the Garden of Eden lecture that people can live stream. And that's a really neat way to do it, because you can do it on your computer and a whole room full of, you can sit down and watch it together. It's not done yet. There were some technical things we had to work out and timing between what they're doing for the DVDs and that. But we're getting there, and God willing, we will have that up so that I can say maybe next week or the week following, go to this address, buy your ticket for whatever it is, and because we don't know that either, and watch it for the next 30 days, and or longer, I don't know, but that's really cool, because I can now, when they do that, I can send that overseas to travel agencies, to news agencies, instead of saying, oh, look, I'm the 451st person to find a Garden of Eden, and mine's the right one. Well, instead of doing that, I can now send them this and say, look at it and make your own mind up, you see.
There you go.
I love it. Because when I was doing, I got to tell you, when I was looking through the Garden of Eden, I was surprised by how many people say, hey, I found the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, me too. I tell you what, it's good I didn't see that before I actually did the lecture stuff, because I didn't. And it would have depressed me so much I wouldn't have done it. But there you go.
It's fantastic. I'm glad you did it. And certainly your work
Absolutely.
is, man, it's so appreciated with us. But Stan, God bless you. Anything that we haven't covered that you want to touch on before we cut you loose?
I think we've probably got it all. I'm just looking here through the emails. I've got those links up there. No, I've put that up there. Okay, yeah. No, I think we're pretty good. That's we've crowded it into an hour. You can go back and catch up later.
And I just want to say this, Stan. Yesterday we had a lady caller who bought Holly's book, Dare to Prepare, and just called in to tell us how wonderful it was. So wanted to pass that along to you also. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that kind? Well, I'll tell her that, because we do get the odd email from people saying that. And it always helps her to let her know that, they're not just looking at Stanley's, lectures and stuff. They're looking at real practical things like she does. So that's good.
That is the best, seriously, the best prep book out in existence by far. So, Stan, it's been a fantastic hour with you. I just want to thank you so very much for spending it with us, and thank Holly for sharing you with us. And give Holly our best as well. And God bless you, my friend.
God bless you guys, Doug and Joe. Your audience, too. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, Stan. Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to go to the top of the hour break, and we're going to take calls into the next hour at 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. Give us a call if you want to jump into the discussion with any comments, questions, concerns. Anything we haven't talked about you want to bring up, give us a call. We'll be right back after these short messages. Stay with us. We've been talking this week about the unrest that's happened in Ferguson, Missouri. Well, the FAA issued a flight warning over Ferguson, Missouri, effective immediately, restricting airspace to all commercial pilots in the county. And they did so because there was rioters who were shooting at police helicopters. A local commercial pilot and former military aviator informed the Gateway Pundit that there is a no-fly zone, and that is extremely uncommon to see in episodes like this. Just showing you
the FAA website. I should tell you this: the FAA website says that the reason is to provide a safe environment for law enforcement activities, which is interesting and somewhat different than the reason given. But the Federal Aviation Administration has issued this temporary flight restriction for that airspace over Ferguson, Missouri through August 18th. Interesting indeed. And even back in the days of the riots in squats, and of course, you've got the riots in the late '60s. None of this happened. I don't recall. And I was just reading about this in a book that's contemporaneous to the time of the riots. It was actually a compilation it is a compilation of articles from, I think it's Newsweek. I'll have to double check on that, but nonetheless, I don't believe I've ever seen that where you had flight restrictions. But this will, folks, grow if allowed to continue on the same path. And this is my prediction. You've got the illegal alien invasion in the South. You've got this incredible environment that is really fertile ground for any number of false flag operations. You've got this racial tension that is really being exploited. Currently, the ground zero is Ferguson, Missouri, but take any other location, any other metropolitan area, and I think that you could find that this could grow exponentially. And we could find ourselves back in the 1968, 1969 environment of the racial riots, much like it was back in the 60s. So that's just my thought. And why not? Especially when you've got multiple crises or a crisis that can be exploited for that purpose. And what better way, Joe, than to allow, or what better way than to create the environment necessary for the use or to validate the use of these MRAPs and the ammunition. I'm not saying that,
yeah.
But the possibility is there, I suppose.
Yes, it is. And there was a write-up today from Business Insider, the frightening or terrifying result of the militarization of police. And it's from Reuters also. It talks about how police officers in armored vehicles looking like they're U.S. Marine patrols in Afghanistan are, it paints this bleak scenario of tactical police and military force, and how it paints a picture like you would expect overseas in fighting, except it's here on our domestic soil. And all this, they have pictures, and we've seen the pictures. People continue to send us pictures of these MRAP type vehicles, the SWAT manned or the SWAT team type people in military, camouflage gear, not black SWAT gear. But it talks about how these changes in the police to military type police tactics are very subliminally and overtly have an effect on the people and how they view their safety. People used to only call the cops if it was an emergency, and Dad, I don't think, when was the last time you ever got pulled over and were worried that, you could get shot or get, ripped out of the car? Well, things are different today than they were, 10 and 15 years ago. And this is happening all over the place.
Well, just once of recent times, but that was something totally different.
All right, well, let's go to the phones. I'm going to hear from you guys. We're going to go to area code 808 first. 808, you're first up tonight. What's on your mind?
Hello, how y'all?
Good evening.
Hello?
What's up?
Yeah, it's Quiet Guy calling. I just want to remind you, I don't know if you checked him out yet, Jonathan Gray, the biblical archaeologist. He addresses a whole lot of that stuff that y'all are talking about with Stan Deyo.
Yes. Yes. The short answer is yes. The longer answer, of course, involves a lot of research. It takes a lot of time to research this stuff. I got to tell you, there's a lot out there. Yeah, well, he's done a lot. He's done tons of research. He sends out an archaeology news flash every week, or a few times a week sometimes. I can forward you a couple of them. You can check it out. What's a good email address to reach you at?
Are you familiar with the website, HomelandSecurityUS.com?
go to that website?
Well,
and there's an email address in there?
Go to our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com. Right on the left-hand side, there's a Contact Us button, and then you see our names right below the little email box. You can click our names to bring up our email address.
Okay. I need to actually contact you about regarding maybe enlisting your service for an investigation for track down an Iraqi girl that I brought over on a fiancé visa that I'm highly concerned about her and her family. But, yeah, I'll go ahead.
All right,
you're cutting out.
You're cutting out
on our
so
end.
We're going to have to cut you loose there, but yeah, go ahead and send the email. Indeed, yeah, we got to cut you loose. I'm getting some really bad noises here in my headphones. I don't know what that's from. One more thing about Stan, about what Stan was talking about, and this from our intelligence insider, and this is pretty interesting because this does answer a question for me. It kind of clears some things up here a little bit. What Stan said. The lower gravity would have allowed greater capillary action to occur. Now, I can understand this. So plants could move water to higher levels, for example. For example, the incredibly tall cedars of Lebanon. Additionally, if the atmosphere were to, if the atmosphere we have today was situated over a smaller sphere. Remember how Stan talked about the expansion of the Earth and how the Earth is growing? Okay. Well, if that oxygen, or if the atmosphere we have today was situated over a smaller Earth, it would have been much deeper and denser, but also the oxygen content would be higher, kind of like Las Vegas casinos. Anyway, and since there was a mist or a fog over the Earth when the sun crossed over the day side of the planet, the atmosphere could expand and lighten slightly and lower during the night, creating a heat pump type effect that would water the Earth morning and evening. And if you think about that, boy, that does make sense, doesn't it? Think about today, when you get up in the morning and you see the dew on the ground, or but you have that heat pump effect. Also, the light passing through the denser, even atmosphere would change the wavelengths of light reaching the surface and make it more pink, bluish, purplish kind of, sort of, just like the wavelength of grow lights. And think about that. You know, most people, well, I shouldn't say most people. My mother used to grow plants indoors, and that's before marijuana, was grown indoors with the plant lights, grow lights. But the light was, if you look at the light, and this is going back some years now, it definitely was quite different, but the wavelength was different. So, interesting indeed. So, there you go.
All right, let's go to area code 936. 936, you're up next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, Joe. Mike, Big Thicket, East Texas.
Good evening.
How you guys
going?
All fine. Hey, I was listening to a past Coast to Coast the other night, and they were talking about the Mahdi and how part of the prophecy with him is that he's supposed to bring back the Ark of the Covenant. Well, did you guys know that the Ark of the Covenant was found about 20 years ago by a guy named Ron Wyatt, W-Y-A-T-T, Ron Wyatt, and he was demonized terribly.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Some kind of a crackpot. He was demonized as some kind of a crackpot, but shoot, the guy, he found Noah's Ark. He found where the Israelis had been led across the Red Sea because of the crashed chariot wheels that were under the water at that point, or, showed chariot wheels, encrusted with all this stuff. But this Ron Wyatt guy found the Ark of the Covenant. It was underneath the Temple Mount, and the Israeli government, of course, took total control of the thing.
You're talking about the man that has since passed away, right?
Yes, he is dead. Yeah, he's gone.
All right. Yeah, I've read some of his research, or I've seen some of the reports of some of his research. I don't know what to say.
I had a hold of some of his videos, and I mean, like, Sodom and Gomorrah, it was obvious that, he even had, like, pellets from Sodom and Gomorrah, the sulfur and so forth, and showed these big copper rivets that were off of the Noah's Ark, that you wouldn't have thought, that they even had technology like that back in Noah's day. But, they were using, like, copper rivets to put the gopher wood together. And so many different things that were on these videos that I had, and I lent them out to some people and don't have them anymore. But anywho, just kind of a heads up, look out for the Ark of the Covenant coming upon us. I mean,
well, okay, we do know in the Bible the last reference to the Ark of the Covenant was in, I believe, the book of Corinthians, or yes, Corinthians, or okay. Or no, Chronicles.
You got it there, Doug. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah,
I don't know what the last mention of it was.
Which is the last reference. And 621 BC, which was, 35 years before the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by Nebuchadnezzar. So, having said that, many believe that the Ark was in the temple at the time and could be there. So,
the way he showed it was under the Temple Mount. And get this, that Jesus' blood, on Golgotha, which is just above the Temple Mount, where they crucified these people, it showed like this hole in the rock that they would drop the crosses into from crucifixion. That Jesus' blood actually dripped onto the seat of the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. That was his big deal there, Ron Wyatt. But real interesting, just super interesting.
Interesting indeed. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the future, and of course the Ark of the Covenant being found, and of course Gordon. I'm trying to think of the name. The gentleman that wrote the book about In Search of the Ark of the Covenant. I'm trying to remember his name. Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock. That's it. Thinking that the Ark is in Ethiopia, I believe.
In Ethiopia, yeah. They always go back to the Ethiopia deal. But
right.
In part of his video, it was a walled off area that was in this cave, underneath the Temple Mount. And all they would let him do is like slip a small, kind of like a camera like you'd use going down pipes or something, like we use today just to check out plumbing. And
right.
You could clearly make out that it was a golden object, and you could see, like these angel wing type things coming together on top of it. It was really cool. And if you ever get a chance, try to find that video someplace out here, because it's awesome, just awesome.
Very interesting. And of course, we do know.
Club, the old Prophecy Club used to have that stuff. But anyway, love you guys, and then
appreciate that.
Be careful. Take care.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good night.
The biblical account of the Ark of the Covenant is fascinating. I always found the Ark of the Covenant, the stories regarding that to be fascinating, and the exact measurements in the Bible and such. I recall asking when I was in the minor seminary. I recall asking a priest about the Ark of the Covenant dimensions and why specifically the dimensions, but why gold, why the metal, why and he got sick of me asking the questions because I was just so curious about it. But anyway, I guess we can move on to calls.
All right, we're going to go to area code 910. 910, you're up next. You're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report.
Hi, Hi, Joe. Hi, Doug.
Good evening.
So grateful for what you do. Thank you for all that you do and all the information you bring. I have a statement or just an observation I would like to share. It's not necessarily a question, and it's regarding the death of, what's his name? Robin Williams. I heard about it yesterday, and I just thought it was very curious that he died at 63 and on the 11th. And 6 and 3 mean, when you add it up, it's 9. So we're talking about 9/11. I have no idea what that may or may not mean, but as I said, I just thought it was very curious. What is your take on that?
That's a really interesting observation. Here's what I know or I believe to be true. I believe that there are celebrities out there who have really, admittedly sold their souls to the devil. And I mean, who is that? Beyonce, or if I'm not even sure that's how you. Beyonce, yeah, I'm not even
There's
sure.
so many of them. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you think about that, at some point that there's going to be a day of reckoning. Now, also, I don't know. I mean, specifically, I don't know about Robin Williams. I don't know about a lot of the celebrity deaths. The person to talk to about that seriously is W, our intelligence insider, only because he has a level of knowledge about celebrity suicides, celebrity deaths, that goes back into the Marilyn Monroe days, and I've been after him too. Tell me more about this, because there is obviously something to the celebrity deaths, and you've got and you've got some. No, I know celebrities die. For example, you take John Belushi, or what was that other Chris Farley?
Chris Farley.
Yeah, I mean, when you do drugs and you're overweight, you're up 24/7, and you're eating onion rings and French fries and pounding down the booze and popping the pills. Something's going to give. So things do happen, but there are some other oddities with respect to celebrity suicides, I think, that or deaths that we have to look at. That are more notable. Some are more notable than others, but interesting take on that.
I guess what made me think of it too was because from what I can remember, he was kind of an advocate for homosexuality and an advocate for, because of the movie he played in, an advocate, it seemed, for reincarnation. And when he played in Miss Doubtfire, that movie came out at a time when it was kind of not promoting homosexuality, but trying to steer the consciousness of the society towards it, even though he wasn't playing a woman as a gay, as a homosexual man. He was just trying to see his children. But I'm just talking about the subtle implication behind the movie.
That's a great observation, because Robin Williams, by the way, was extremely liberal, and he was very, oh my goodness, I happened to catch a little bit of, of course, when someone dies, they run clips of their performances, and I saw one where he was talking about, homosexuality, and there was something else, but you're right. The tendency to steer, to nudge, to influence society a certain way. You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the movie, I can't this is the way things are, or this is the way they were. I don't know. It's about where his wife died, and she came back. He went to go rescue her from hell. And so basically the movie was implying that you can be reincarnated and he loved her so much that even though she committed suicide, he rescued her from the jaws of hell. And while the movie was very interesting to look at because of all the colors and the animatron and the animation and all that, I always I try to look at the meaning behind the movie. And I was thinking, this sounds a lot like reincarnation, and I'm not with that, and I don't agree with that. But it actually brought tears to my eyes to find out that he died. Not that, honestly speaking, people die that we're not going to get out of this alive. So, I wasn't so hurt that he died as much as I was hurt in my spirit to think that he may not have made it. Of course, who am I to say that? But based on his position and his stance socially, like you said, he was a liberal. That kind of gives me the feeling that, wow, maybe he missed heaven. And when I was sitting there just contemplating the whole thing, I said, he died at 63, and I was like, 6 and 3, 9. And I asked my son, I said, what's today's date? He said the 11th, and I almost fell out of the chair when I put it together, 9/11. I was like, what?
Well, it would be 8. He actually died on Sunday morning, I believe, so it would have been the 10th, I think. But nonetheless.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't find out about it until yesterday. Well, I guess it was yesterday.
The world didn't
kind of
find out about it until yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, in a way, and when you go back to what Detective John Cameron was talking about with Edward Wayne Edwards, when you go back and think about the importance not just of when something takes place, but when something is learned. Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So and of course, So there's a lot of things that we don't know about, and but very good observations. And the thing too, think about this. Let's just say it is what it is, that he was depressed and he committed suicide. What makes a person believe that the pain they're feeling on Earth, the mental anxiety they're going through here in this earthly life, to take away, to kill yourself? What are you going to experience for eternity if that's the case? Wow.
But if you believe in reincarnation, think about it. You're a prime candidate to be deceived.
Sure.
Well, if I'll come back and I can do it better the next time, or whatever the case may be. And I'm not making light of him at all, because I really loved him as an actor. But there's so much room for deception if you believe that there are options of coming back and trying it again.
You're exactly right. Yeah. And on his behalf, Nanu.
Right,
if you remember
right.
that. All right. God bless you, dear. Thank you so much.
God bless you. You guys are always in my prayers.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
We're going to go to our next caller. We're going to go to area code 734. 734, you're up next. Thanks for holding. You're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report. What's on your mind tonight?
Hello?
That's you.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Oh, you guys doing? Hey, my name's Jay. I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I've been listening to you guys for a long time, and I just got to say you guys are awesome. God bless you guys for what you do.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. No worries. Actually, with that being said, I was kind of calling for a couple things. One, I guess I was kind of calling to ask for the prayers of you guys and the audience. I'm an ex-military guy. I was in for 10 years or whatever, and I just really feel like I don't know. I've been under attack in so many areas of my life, and I don't know. I really feel like when I was in the military, I was being groomed for something. Once again, I was in for like 10 years. Everything, it's written like all over all my whole career. I remember yesterday, I believe you guys were talking about what was the number, 211 or 216, was it?
216, that's correct, yes.
It's just funny. My first unit that I was in the military was 216 infantry, which is supposedly the highest decorated unit in the entire U.S. Army. Just so happened when I got out of the military, when you look at my paperwork, my years in service just happened to be 9 years and 11 months. It also happens that my daughter, who was born in a military hospital, while I was in the military, I've been having so many issues with her. She's 14 at this point. It just happens her birth time was 11:33 in the morning. It's just like the more I study and the more I research all these things, which I've kind of been into for a while, it's just the more I'm realizing it's like something is going on in my life, and you know, I don't know what it is, and yeah, I
get that. And you say you feel that you're kind of under attack, and I've got to tell you, we do as well, and that's why tomorrow night we're going to have Steve Quayle and Pastor David Langford on. We're going to be talking about a number of things tomorrow night. So definitely tune in tomorrow night, because I do believe that will help you and much, if not or the entirety of our audience tomorrow with Pastor Langford and Steve Quayle. But having said that, what do you feel? I mean, is it more of a spiritual, demonic type of attack, this darkness you feel, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what are you referencing when you feel like you're under attack?
Well, yeah. Well, I kind of got to go back a little bit. Well, I was in the military, like I said. I had been once again groomed and been to a lot of different schools. They'd been sending me to all sorts of things and whatnot, and I was kind of busy while I was in. During that time, I met a woman. I had a child, you know, inappropriately, of course, out of wedlock. You know, that's military life, unfortunately, for some of us. But with that being said, her mother had some issues and whatnot, and I ended up getting full custody of her because of the issues, the substance issues her mom had. During this time, after I'd gotten custody of her or whatever, it's just been nothing but issues. I've had her since she was 3, and it's like she is almost, I almost want to say possessed. I mean, I can't even begin to get into all the things. Currently, she's like in a girls, what do you call it? I'm kind of flustered now. But she's in a girls' placement right now, and I've been visiting her and whatever, but it's just like her moods and everything, they've got her on different psychotropics and whatnot. It's like I've done everything I can as far as prayer. My mom is a huge prayer warrior. We've been trying to battle this. So we're dealing with huge, huge issues. I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg right now with all the issues.
Did you say how old she was? I missed that if you did.
14, which is another crazy 14. Number. Yeah. So, and it's like all this has kind of come to a head right now, to a climax almost with her. I mean, running away, promiscuity, drug use at 14, you know?
Right.
And it's so overwhelming, you know, and I'm dealing with this whole financial thing as well. And sharing custody with my other daughter, who's 3, you know, as a single dad. It's so overwhelming right now. And I seriously feel like I'm being oppressed in so many areas, even as far as my employment. Excellent resume, this, that, you know, can't get anything, can't do anything. I seem to be stuck in this job that's going nowhere. And like I say, from every angle you can imagine, I just feel like I'm just being... Yeah.
Tell us again, tell the audience again your first name and where you're from. You're from Ann Arbor, right?
Yeah, I'm in Ann Arbor. Jay.
And Jay, all right, Jay. I'll tell you what. We're just going to ask our audience to keep you, Jay, from Ann Arbor, in their prayers, your family, your daughters, your family in prayer, and definitely tune in tomorrow night to the show. Faith overcomes a lot, and it's our faith in a great God and His salvation that's going to enable us to be able to stand and be strong. And we need to be faithful, and we need to have the faith. Not only be faithful, but have the faith that we can be overcomers, and that's what we need. And we will indeed keep you and your family in our prayers, and we ask that our audience do the same for you, sir.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and just know that you have contributed to opening the eyes of many people. Many people have turned on to you guys and have come back and been like, wow, this is real. So just know you guys are doing things.
Thank you. God bless
Thanks
you.
so much.
Jay, thanks so much indeed. Yeah, you take care of yourself, buddy.
You too.
All right.
Have a great night.
And folks, I mean that. Tonight when you hit your knees, and I know that each and every one of us, we've got so much on our plates, don't we? We don't even know where to turn half the time. We've got so many problems. Our problems have problems. And if you're like me, I mean, believe me, my problems have got problems. I grew up, it seems like you wake up in the morning and you're going in one direction, or you wake up thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. And, that lasts for about 5 minutes, and your entire day changes, and it goes south because of things outside of what seemingly your control. And you have problems, and then problems on top of the problems, and it's my goodness. But we're all in that same position, at least most of us are. So tonight, when you hit your knees and you're praying for yourself, your problems, say an extra prayer for Jay and for his family, his situation, for his job situation, and for people, not just Jay from Ann Arbor, but for Jay from Ann Arbor and for people like him, because there are many of us out there. Let's be sure.
Yes, there are. Moving along here on the calls, we're going to go to area code 512. 512, thanks for holding. You're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report.
Yeah, that's breaking up.
Hello?
Hello?
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my name's Gary. I've been listening to you for about a year. I love you guys.
Thank
you. Okay, well, the question, I just want to bring up something. You were talking about earlier on the show about the thinking that 2015 we're going to be an economic collapse. And that was your best guess, you said. Well, I think you're right on, but I don't know. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I didn't mean to talk over you. There is kind of a lag here. That's kind of my gut feeling, and that's not based on any hard evidence. That's just my gut feeling.
Well, the reason I think you're right on is I know you're familiar with Jonathan Cahn.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was just listening to him today, and are you familiar with what he says is the Shemitah year? In that 2001, when we had the big collapse and the .com collapse, that was the Shemitah year. And then we had it again exactly. It's always September. It's a Shemitah. In September, of course, 2008, again, we had a big collapse. And he said that the next collapse is coming, Shemitah year, will be September of 2015. So you may be right on. He's expecting.
Wow.
Yeah. We've seen his predictions, and thank you, caller. I'm going to have to put you back on hold because the noise is just a little bit rough there. But, yeah, what you're referring to is the judgment. What he says is the judgment of God occurring in periods of years, of 7 years, starting from 9/11 to the economic collapse 7 years after that to what we'll see in 7 years from there. And he believes, based on that timing, that we will see a change in either something in the economic realm, or it could be a natural disaster, a worldwide natural disaster. It might not be an economic collapse. It might not even get that far. We might have something else before that happens to bring us to our knees. We're going to move right along. We're going to go to area code 719. This is Troy. Troy, thanks for calling. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Doug.
Good evening.
How you doing, Troy?
You guys in there? Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Hey, it's good talking to you guys again. Hey, chat room. Hey, I got 3 headlines that I think I want to discuss. First of all, did you guys see the miss on the Japanese GDP? That's a big one.
No.
Say that again. You got cut out there. Something on the Japanese GDP?
Yep, there was a big miss on the Japanese GDP. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with any work that Kyle Bass has done.
Oh, very much, yes.
He's dead on target. I've studied quite a bit of his stuff, and about 18 months ago, he was predicting a collapse in the Japanese bond market because basically their GDP is floating right around 240%. I mean, the Japs they're in the tank. I mean, with one for Fukushima, which is bad enough, and the fact that the birth-death rate is now surpassed by adults having diapers. This miss on the GDP, I mean, it's completely expected because back in June they also raised their consumption tax, which I guess nobody could have saw that one coming, right?
The guerrilla economist, contacted me. He's got information about exactly what you're talking about, and by the way, he called that. Joe, I don't know, when was it? Maybe 6-7 months ago.
He did.
Yes,
I think that was back in the beginning.
He's dead on. His financials he's dead on, and I think it'd be cool if you guys were able to get Kyle Bass, because the only thing with Kyle Bass I don't agree with is his take on the U.S. real estate market, because I just don't see how the contagion from the Japanese fall. I mean, this would be bad enough if it wasn't for all these other crazy things going on. So it's like, where do you look? So that one's kind of a big deal to look forward to, from the economic ripples that are going on. But here's another story that I just pulled up too that I was reading is it was on Zero Hedge on for the healthcare workers. They say 170 health workers now have been infected with Ebola. Now, granted, we're talking about Africa, so it's not like these guys are in level 3 biosuits and stuff. But that's kind of a big deal because, I mean, A, who's going to take care of these people? I read one of the lines that says they're actually turning Ebola patients away. So they're like saying, you might be bleeding out of all your orifices, but you can move along. Go infect some other people. How's that supposed to work out?
I know what you're saying there, and you paint an interesting picture, a mental image there. It's crazy at its core, isn't it? I mean, to think that this is even possible, this is taking place today.
So we got that one floating around, which, so the Japanese thing. Then yesterday, swooping back to Japan, I read another article that they're saying the Japanese are deciding it's cool to dump like thousands and thousands of tons of nuclear water or waste water into the Pacific Ocean. And then they're like curious to like why sea stars are dying in Alaska. How it's like, come on, guys, seriously?
Yeah.
So, here's the big one
Fukushima is not going away. Go ahead, sir.
Here's the biggest one I wanted to tell you guys about, which I found actually I went back in the way back machine and thought. Previous to my occupation, what I'm doing now, I was in the Marines, and actually I was kind of in the Special Forces side of it. And so back in 1992, you might have recalled that. There was a little time in L.A. with a little turbulence going on.
I recall it very well.
King thing.
Yes.
Or actually it was Dental and Regini or something like that. Anyway, basically they were tearing apart Los Angeles. At the time I was down in Camp Pendleton. I was training with the reconnaissance guys. And actually my unit got called up because this was right back after the Gulf and all that stuff. But my unit got actually called up, and we were fixing to get transferred. The guys that were actually training, we were attached out to this training unit, but we were actually going to get called up to go assist with the LA riots. Now, at the time, I didn't realize it was, there was a little thing called Posse Comitatus. I thought it was kind of a cool idea to, like, go stop those looters, but I mean, we another unit actually got sent up there to, like, assist in the background, but when I was reading today, looking at the militarization of the cops and stuff, and then shutting down a no-fly zone, I'm thinking, where are we at? Are we like, did we go to Syria all of a sudden? But the headline's right out of Missouri.
Very incredible. And just to be clear, you're not part of the National Guard. You're part of the actual military. Yeah,
no. I did my 6 years and my +2, and I got out.
Okay.
So I'm done with all that business.
Yeah.
I usually actually joke with the guys. I'm like, nuclear war could start. I'm not going anywhere.
Well, let me ask you a question now. What was the general mood of your fellow soldiers at the time? Cool to be on the streets of America doing this, or was there
I hate to say it like this, but at the time, but you got to. I mean, yeah, actually at the time. I mean, but that's because a lot of I hate to say it like that, but yeah, a lot of us were pretty pumped up to, like, go do our duty. But I hope to God that has changed.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, now what I know now and what I know then are two different things. But
sure.
You have to be fair. I think there's a lot more awareness out there. I'm hoping, because I still keep contact with some of my some guys in the community and whatnot. And it's I would say my gut feeling is there's a it's a 60-40 split. And I don't know which is the 60 and the 40 as far as who would actually be Americans. That's my gut. Which, I mean, that's kind of bad, right?
Either way, 60 or 40 is bad, yes.
Well, and you got to realize, Doug, and this is here's another thesis I have. I personally think that no ex-military should actually be in law enforcement, because we're just trained differently. When I was trained for close-quarter battles, we were trained to kill everybody in sight. That's just how we rolled. Kick the doors in, shoot everybody, be done with it.
Oh yeah, and every police department is really recognized or is structured as a paramilitary unit. Of course, the rankings are pretty much the same. Especially the larger cities, you're looking at a paramilitary unit for law enforcement. And that goes especially for the state police. I know in Pennsylvania you got the state police there, very much like the military in terms of a boot camp and the training and such. So
same mentality.
Very interesting observations. Yeah.
And one other last thing, too, is I actually trained with the FBI sniper package back in the day. I mean, which we kind of laughed at, because the average police engagement is about 88 feet, which is not much. But they were still, I mean, there's a lot of guys that train that way. But, I mean, the whole Bundy thing, you saw a lot of former military. I mean, and I'm down here in the Springs, and I go work out, and I train with, weight training stuff. I see there's nothing but vets, it's, I don't know which way this is going to roll, but, I mean, we live in interesting times, man.
Yeah, we do. Do you see, well, from your perspective, from your vantage point, and this also speaks to your geographical location, do you see, for example, some sort of racial, aside from Missouri, what's going on there, do you see things going like Missouri all across the United States? Do you see a racial riot type situation, chaos from racial strife or even economic strife?
Doug, it was like what, 28 million people in the LA basin, basically from Ventura south. That doesn't end well. I mean, that's a lot of people in that crazy. Yeah. I mean, and then once you bottleneck that up, and then the food goes south. I mean, that's not a place to be. Chicago, not a place to be. St. Louis, not a place to be. Houston, not a place to be. Where I'm at right now, I mean, the Springs, 500,000 people. It's still not a place to be, but we're surrounded by basically 5 military bases. I think pretty much they'd lock this place down pretty quick. Fairly easy. I thought it through. Park a tank across 25, park a tank south of 25. You bottleneck this place up pretty quick. Plus, I hate to say it, but I think I'm behind enemy lines here in the New World Order headquarters.
Most likely. I mean, in the Springs area, the Colorado's pretty much, the home for what they call, the new capital of the New World Order. So
I'll tell you one other thing that was really spooky I've seen in the last, I'd say, 18 months, because I'm out and about in the rural parts of Northern Springs and whatnot, basically where they burned up all the Black Forest fire and whatnot. I saw last year, which kind of spooked me. I saw, constantly on a every other day basis and stuff. And granted, I think that my paranoia runs a little deep here, but basically they were flying at about 800 feet, two C-141s on a constant basis, and C-130s they're on training missions, and they fly over the rural section. And there's a lot of drop zones there. And previous to my other experiences, I know what I'm talking about on that aspect. But my thought was, man, it's on the rural areas. They could drop a company in real quick and start securing those, because there's a pretty heavy contingent of what one might call preppers out here. So I was thinking, man, that'd be kind of the way to do it, is secure the guys in the outlying areas. But that's speculation on my part. You can't be too paranoid, because there's 5 bases around. They got to train somewhere. Still.
Well, look, we're seeing military drills all across the United States in different areas and different types of drills, but nonetheless, there are drills going on, and there are practice, as you pointed out. And I got to tell you, I've never seen this in my entire life. Never seen this type of activity. So we have to keep our eyes open.
We live in interesting times, fellas.
We do. God bless you.
Anyway, that's all I got for you guys. Hey, I hope you guys
buddy.
have a great evening. Thank you for what you guys do.
You too. Thank you, man.
All right, see you.
And
Bye.
we're up against the end of the program, Joe. That'll do it for us tonight.
Tomorrow, Pastor Langford and Steve Quayle will be joining us, and it should be a fantastic show, 8 p.m. Looking forward to that.
Faith that overcomes fear is going to be the topic. Faith that overcomes fear. And that's the topic. Yep, indeed it is.
All right, with that, we're going to call it a night. God bless you all. Thank you for listening. Until tomorrow, stay safe. Have a great evening.